The conference room fell silent. I stood there, my presentation still glowing on the screen, but his words hit like a slap across the face. If you don't like it, then leave. I smiled. Fine. But I wouldn't just leave. I'd take the heart and soul of this company with me. He had no idea he'd just opened the door to the worst nightmare of his career, and when the dust settled, half the best team would be gone. My name is Emily Carter, and I've spent 8 years building products that actually matter at Northpoint Systems. That Tuesday morning started like any other coffee in hand, slides polished, ready to present 6 months of user research that would revolutionize our flagship product. The executive conference room was packed, board members, department heads, everyone who mattered. I'd rehearsed this presentation 100 times. As you can see from the heat maps, I clicked to the next slide. Our users are struggling with the current interface. We're losing 47% of new customers within the first week. This is ridiculous. Daniel Cross, our new VP of Product, hadn't even looked up from his phone. He'd been with us exactly 3 weeks, brought in from some failed startup in California after our beloved CEO Michael Torres got promoted to the parent company. Daniel's reputation preceded him, a disruptor, who believed in breaking things that weren't broken. I'm sorry. I kept my voice steady. He finally looked up, that practiced Silicon Valley smirk spreading across his face. This whole user research obsession, it's outdated thinking. We don't need to ask users what they want. We need to tell them what they need. The room shifted uncomfortably. I'd worked with these people for years. They knew my track record. Every product I'd touched had exceeded adoption targets, but nobody spoke up. Daniel, the data clearly shows. The data, he interrupted, standing now for dramatic effect, is noise. You've wasted 6 months and probably hundreds of thousands of dollars asking people questions when you should have been building. This isn't some academic exercise. Emily, this is business. My hands gripped the clicker tighter. With respect, our customer retention depends on innovation, not this. He waved dismissively at my slides. Focus groups, surveys, it's kindergarten stuff. Maybe that worked 5 years ago, but the market has evolved. Apparently, some people haven't. The insult hung in the air like smoke. Someone coughed. Nobody defended me. I've scheduled a real product strategy session for tomorrow, Daniel continued, addressing the room now, not me. We'll be discussing AI integration and automated user journeys. Real innovation, not this. What did you call it? User research. He said it like the words tasted bad. If you have a problem with the new direction, he looked directly at me. If you don't like it, then leave. We need builders here, not philosophers. 20 pairs of eyes watched me, waiting. The Emily from a year ago might have argued, might have tried to defend her work with more data, more logic, but I saw it clearly now. This wasn't about the presentation. This was about power. Daniel needed to establish dominance, and I was the sacrifice. Understood, I said, clicking off the presentation. I'll take that under advisement. Good. He sat back down, already scrolling through his phone again. Meeting's over. Everyone except the leadership team can go. I wasn't leadership team anymore. Apparently, I gathered my laptop, my notebook, maintaining perfect composure as I walked past colleagues who couldn't meet my eyes. Sarah from marketing touched my arm gently as I passed. Jim from engineering looked like he wanted to say something but didn't. The hallway felt endless. My heels clicked against the polished floor, each step echoing my humiliation. But beneath the anger, beneath the embarrassment, something else was stirring. Daniel Cross thought he'd just won. He thought he'd put me in my place, established his new world order. He had no idea what he'd just started. Because here's the thing about spending 8 years at a company: you learn where all the bodies are buried. You know which clients are hanging by a thread. You know which projects are actually keeping the lights on. And most importantly, you know who the real talent is, the people who actually make things work. Daniel Cross had just declared war on the wrong person, and if he wanted me gone, fine, but I wouldn't go quietly, and I definitely wouldn't go alone. 8 years, that's how long I'd given to Northpoint Systems. I started as a junior designer fresh out of grad school, nervous and eager, carrying my portfolio in a leather case my dad had given me for graduation. Michael Torres had interviewed me himself, unusual for a CEO. But that was Michael. He believed in knowing every person who joined his team. "We're not just building software here, Emily," he'd said during that first meeting. "We're building something that matters. Every decision we make affects real people trying to do real work. Never forget that." I never did. Under Michael's leadership, Northpoint had transformed from a struggling enterprise software company to a market leader, and I'd been part of that transformation every step of the way. My first major project, redesigning the dashboard that our clients stared at 8 hours a day, increased productivity metrics by 32%. Michael had announced it at the all-hands meeting, made sure everyone knew it was my work. That was the culture we'd built. Recognition, respect, results based on real data, not ego. I remember the day Michael told us he was moving up to the parent company. It was 3 months ago, a rainy Thursday afternoon. He'd gathered the product team in our workspace, not a conference room, but our actual workspace, surrounded by whiteboards covered in user journey maps and sticky notes from our last brainstorming session. "I want you all to know," he'd said, "that what we've built here is special. The next VP will be lucky to inherit this team. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep putting users first." We'd believed him. We'd been naive. Daniel Cross arrived like a storm. First day, he reorganized the entire floor plan. Our collaborative workspace became an open office nightmare. He brought in 3 people from his previous company, Ryan, his lieutenant, plus 2 others who seemed to exist solely to nod at Daniel's ideas. He scheduled alignment meetings at 7:30 in the morning and sync sessions at 6 in the evening, making sure everyone knew that FaceTime mattered more than output. But I'd tried to adapt. I really had. When Daniel announced his new vision for the product roadmap, scrapping 6 months of carefully planned features our enterprise clients had specifically requested, I put together a diplomatic presentation showing the financial impact. He'd dismissed it in an email, didn't even warrant a meeting. When he hired an expensive consulting firm to assess our innovation quotient, whatever that meant, I collaborated fully, even though the consultants clearly had no understanding of our industry. Their final report recommended exactly what Daniel had already decided. Shocking. The breaking point should have been when he promoted Ryan to design strategy lead, a made-up position that essentially made him my supervisor. Despite having 0 design experience, Ryan's background was in sales. His design philosophy seemed to be, make it pop more. But even then, I'd persevered, because the work mattered. Our platform helped thousands of companies manage their operations. Real people depended on what we built. I couldn't just walk away. So I'd poured myself into the product enhancement project. 6 months of user interviews, prototype testing, iterative design based on actual feedback. It was everything Michael had taught us. Let the users guide the product, not the other way around. The early results were phenomenal. Our beta testers were reporting 50% faster task completion. The accessibility improvements alone would have opened us up to an entirely new market segment. I genuinely believed that if I could just show Daniel the results, the undeniable data, he'd see the value, that underneath all his disruption rhetoric, he'd recognize good work. Today's presentation was supposed to be my proof, my vindication, my demonstration that the old Northpoint way, Michael's way, still worked. Instead, it became my execution. Standing in my office now, looking at the awards on the wall, the photos from product launches, the thank you notes from clients whose businesses we'd helped transform, I realized something crucial. Daniel didn't dismiss my work because it was bad. He dismissed it because it was good, because it represented everything he needed to destroy to make his mark. He couldn't build his empire on top of our foundation. He needed to burn it all down first, salt the earth, then plant his own flag in the ashes. The enhancement project wasn't just dismissed, it would be buried. The months of work, the insights we'd gained, the problems we'd identified and solved, all of it would disappear into some forgotten folder on a server somewhere, and our users would keep struggling with the same interface issues, the same workflow problems, because Daniel Cross needed to play Silicon Valley prophet. But here's what Daniel didn't know: I'd learned more from Michael Torres than just how to build good products. I'd learned how to protect them, how to think 3 moves ahead, how to turn corporate politics into corporate justice. The enhancement project was about to become very valuable indeed. just not for North Point systems. The isolation started immediately. The next morning, I arrived to find my meeting invitations, revoked product strategy, client feedback sessions, even the weekly design review I'd been running for 3 years. My badge no longer opened the executive conference room. Small humiliations, precisely calculated. Ryan appeared at my desk around 10, trying to look casual but clearly following orders. "Hey, Emily. Daniel wants me to take over the client presentations going forward. You know, to free you up for other things." "What other things, Ryan?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "Documentation. He wants you to document all the legacy processes for knowledge transfer." Legacy processes. My innovations from 6 months ago were now legacy. I smiled pleasantly. "Of course. Send me the template." The first week was a masterclass in corporate assassination. Daniel removed me from the product Slack channels, streamlining communications. He reassigned my team members to Ryan one by one. Optimizing resource allocation. He even changed the weekly all-hands to Tuesday mornings, conflicting with my standing client call, the one client relationship I'd maintained for 5 years. When I requested to move the client call, Daniel replied, all to the email. "We need team players who prioritize internal alignment over individual relationships." My colleagues started treating me like I had something contagious. Lunch invitations dried up. The casual coffee runs stopped including me. People who used to drop by my office for advice now walked past without making eye contact. But a few brave souls reached out in secret. Sophie, one of my junior designers, sent a signal message. "This is bullshit. Everyone knows it." Mark from engineering cornered me in the parking garage. "He's going to destroy everything we built. The code base can't support his AI fantasies." Lisa from customer success slipped me a note during a rare in-person encounter. 3 enterprise clients called this week, asking why you're not on their accounts anymore. They're not happy. The second week, Daniel escalated. He scheduled a design process optimization review and invited everyone except me. The conclusions, Ryan informed me later, were that my user research methods were outdated and unnecessarily complex. They would be moving to rapid intuitive design, which seemed to mean Ryan would sketch something and they'd build it. He assigned me to update the company style guide, a task typically given to interns. Then he criticized the updates in a public Slack channel. "This is why we need fresh perspectives. Some people are stuck in 2015. The third week was when it became truly vicious. Daniel started holding impromptu innovation sessions at 4:45 p.m., knowing I had to leave at 5 for my daughter's daycare pickup. When I missed them, he'd send passive-aggressive emails. "We missed your input at yesterday's session," though I suppose documentation doesn't require much innovation. He began questioning my expenses from the user research project, implying financial irresponsibility. He requested a comprehensive audit of my time allocation for the past quarter, wanting to know what value I'd delivered for my salary. He even suggested in the leadership Slack, which I was somehow still in, probably so I could see it, that my role might be redundant in our new flatter structure. The psychological warfare was precise, professional, and perfectly legal. No overtly discriminatory language, no policy violations, just a steady, deliberate campaign to make my life unbearable until I broke. But Daniel had made a critical error. He'd assumed I was like the others he'd pushed out at his previous companies, that I'd either fight back emotionally and give him cause for termination, or I'd slink away quietly, defeated and demoralized. He didn't realize I was taking notes. Every slight, every exclusion, every public humiliation documented with dates, times, and witnesses. Not for a lawsuit, those rarely work, and I had bigger plans, but for leverage, for timing. He also didn't realize that while he was busy destroying my internal position, he'd forgotten about my external relationships, the clients who'd been asking for me, the competitors who'd been watching our moves, the industry contacts I'd built over 8 years, who were very interested in why North Point's best designer was suddenly updating style guides. Most importantly, he didn't realize that when you systematically isolate someone, when you strip away their official channels and formal power, you force them to get creative. You force them to build alternate networks, to find different paths, to think like an insurgent instead of an employee. Daniel Cross thought he was managing me out. What he was actually doing was setting me free. Free from loyalty to a company that would let this happen. Free from any obligation to protect North Point's interests. Free to play by the same ruthless rules he'd established. The fourth week, as I sat in my office updating fonts in a style guide no one would ever use, I made my decision. Daniel wanted me gone. Fine, but I'd choose the terms of my exit, and I'd make sure that when I left, the foundation he was so eager to build on would crumble beneath him. The game was on. He just didn't know it yet. The realization hit me at 2:30 in the morning, during another sleepless night reviewing my employment contract. There it was, buried in Section 7.3.2, a clause I'd negotiated years ago when Michael wanted me to work on a side project for a nonprofit. Employee may retain intellectual property rights to work created on personal equipment and personal time, provided such work does not directly compete with company's existing products at time of creation. My lawyer had insisted on that language. I thought it was overkill then. Now it was everything. I pulled up my laptop, my personal MacBook, not the company Dell, and logged into my personal GitHub account. 6 months of commits, every iteration of the enhancement project, the user research data, anonymized and encrypted, the design files in my personal Figma account, the prototypes on my personal testing server, all of it created during nights and weekends, technically on my own time, using my own resources. Daniel had dismissed the project as worthless, kindergarten stuff, which meant it didn't compete with North Point's new direction. His arrogance had given me clear ownership of everything that actually mattered. But the code and designs were just part of my advantage. The real asset was knowledge specifically. What Daniel didn't know about North Point's vulnerabilities. He didn't know that Atlas Corp, our biggest client representing 40% of our revenue, had been frustrated for months about our lack of user-centered improvements. Their contract was up for renewal in 8 weeks. Janet Morrison, their VP of Operations, had told me personally during our last call, "Emily, you're the only reason we haven't started looking at alternatives." He didn't know that 3 of our enterprise clients had accessibility lawsuits pending, and my enhancement project included the fixes that would bring us into compliance. Legal had been quietly counting on that release. He didn't know that the database architecture couldn't handle the AI integration he was promising. Mark from engineering had run the load tests the system would crash with anything more than trivial machine learning operations, but Mark had only shared those results with me, afraid of being labeled not innovative enough if he raised concerns. Most critically, he didn't know that I'd been keeping detailed documentation of every client complaint, every system limitation, every technical debt item we'd been ignoring. Not in the company wiki where he could find it, but in my personal Notion workspace. 3 years of institutional knowledge that existed nowhere else because Daniel had been so effective at driving out everyone who'd been here longer than me. I started organizing everything methodically. The enhancement project files went into an encrypted cloud storage. The client correspondence got backed up to my personal email, nothing confidential. Just the parts where they expressed frustration with North Point's direction. The technical assessments from team members who'd confided in me got documented with dates and context. Then I began my research on Daniel himself. LinkedIn showed his career pattern: 5 companies in 8 years, always leaving just before major product launches. Some digging revealed why his AI-powered scheduling app at his last startup had promised revolutionary optimization, but delivered a system that randomly deleted meetings. The company folded 6 months after he left for North Point. His references were interesting too. 3 of them now worked at companies that competed with their former employers. A pattern was emerging. Daniel wasn't just incompetent. He was potentially a corporate weapon, deliberately or not. Join a company, destroy the culture, drive out the talent, then move on before the consequences hit. I found his technical publications lots of buzzwords, no substance. His revolutionary AI framework paper was literally just a wrapper around existing OpenAI APIs with some fancy visualization. His disruption methodology was standard agile with different terminology. The emperor had no clothes, but he wore them with such confidence that boards of directors kept buying him new wardrobes. The most valuable discovery came from a former colleague of his who responded to my carefully worded LinkedIn message. "Watch your contracts," she wrote. He tried to claim ownership of everything when he left, even stuff created before he arrived. Document everything. So I did. Every file got time-stamped. Every personal project got backed up in triplicate. Every piece of my work that could potentially be claimed by Northpoint got clearly labeled with creation dates and ownership documentation. I also started building my insurance policy. Screenshots of Daniel's Slack messages dismissing user needs. Records of his decision to skip security reviews to move faster. The email where he told Ryan to just make something up for the client presentation. The video from the all hands where he said, "Compliance is for companies that can't innovate." It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about protection. Daniel had shown me the game he was playing, and I was learning the rules. But unlike him, I wasn't planning to just destroy things. I was planning to build something better from the ashes. My personal laptop became command central. My apartment became a war room, and my secret advantage, the work Daniel had dismissed as worthless, became the foundation for what would come next. Daniel thought he'd neutralized me by taking away my formal power. He didn't understand that real power in tech doesn't come from titles or meeting invites. It comes from knowing how things actually work, from relationships built over years, and from having something everyone needs but can't get anywhere else. I had all three, and I was about to use them. The message came through LinkedIn at 11:45 p.m. on a Friday. "Emily, heard through the grapevine that you might be exploring options. Coffee next week? Rachel Moore." Rachel Moore, head of product design at SummitWorks, Northpoint's biggest competitor. We'd met at conferences over the years, always had mutual respect, even grabbed drinks occasionally to complain about the industry. But this wasn't a social invitation. We met at a small cafe in Capitol Hill, far from both our offices. Rachel didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'll be direct," she said, stirring her cortado. "We know what's happening at Northpoint. Daniel Cross is becoming legendary for all the wrong reasons. 3 of your former engineers have already reached out to us. But we're not interested in just picking up refugees. We want to win." "And you think I can help you win?" She leaned forward. "Atlas Corp is unhappy. We both know it. They've been quietly soliciting proposals for when their contract expires. We've made the shortlist. But Northpoint still has the inside track. Inertia is powerful. Unless something changes the game." My poker face must have slipped because she smiled. "I know you, Emily. You don't do anything halfway. Whatever you've been working on that Daniel shot down, it's probably exactly what Atlas needs. And I'm betting you were smart enough to protect your work." "That's a lot of assumptions." "Is it? Look. I've been watching Northpoint for years. Under Michael Torres. You were untouchable. Great products, happy clients, steady growth. Then Daniel arrives, and suddenly your best people are updating style guides and documenting legacy processes. It's not hard to connect the dots." She pulled out an iPad, showing me a presentation slide. "This is our offer. Senior Director of Product Design, full autonomy to build your team, budget to implement your vision. And here's the kicker, we'll honor any intellectual property you bring with you, provided it's legally yours. You'd maintain creator credits on anything you've developed." The number at the bottom of the slide was 60% higher than my current salary. "Plus," Rachel continued, "we're prepared to make offers to select members of your team, people you trust, people who understand what you're building." "You want me to poach my own team?" "I want you to save them from Daniel Cross. There's a difference." She had a point. Sophie had been crying in the bathroom yesterday after Ryan criticized her designs in front of the entire floor. Mark was already interviewing elsewhere after Daniel ignored his warnings about the infrastructure. Lisa had been moved to night shift customer support, despite being the only person who truly understood our enterprise clients' needs. "What makes you think Atlas would switch?" I asked. Rachel smiled again. "Janet Morrison is an old friend from business school. She's been very clear about what Atlas needs: better accessibility features, streamlined workflows, actual user testing instead of executive intuition. Sounds familiar?" It was exactly what my enhancement project delivered. "Here's what I'm proposing," Rachel said. "You join us in 2 weeks. Bring your project legally, cleanly, undeniably yours. We'll fast-track implementation, have a working demo in 3 weeks. When Atlas sees what we can deliver versus Daniel's vaporware AI promises, the choice becomes obvious. And if Daniel sues, for what? Using your own work created on your own time, hiring employees who chose to leave, winning a client contract fairly. He can try, But Summit Works has deeper pockets than his ego. Besides, she pulled out a newspaper clipping. Did you see this? His last company is suing him for sabotage. Apparently, he tried to take their entire code base to North Point, glass houses and all that. I hadn't seen that. It was perfect. I need guarantees, I said. Written contracts for anyone I bring, protection from any legal challenges, and I want partnership track within 18 months. Done, and negotiable, but likely yes. Anything else? The Atlas presentation. I want to lead it personally. Rachel laughed. Oh, I was counting on it. Janet specifically asked if you'd be involved. She's been hoping for this call. We shook hands across the table. The deal wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about vindication. Everything Daniel had dismissed as worthless was about to become Summit Works' competitive advantage. Every person he'd marginalized would become a key player in his downfall. One more thing, Rachel said as we prepared to leave. Daniel's been shopping around his AI framework to investors, trying to raise a side fund. Might want to document any company resources he's using for that. Just in case things get ugly. I smiled. Already done. Walking back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks, hope. Not just for revenge, but for redemption. For the chance to build something great with people who actually valued what I brought to the table. Daniel had given me the push I needed to leave a company I'd outgrown. He'd shown me who my real allies were, and he'd inadvertently handed me everything I needed to destroy him. The meeting with Rachel was supposed to be exploratory. Instead, it became the beginning of the end for Daniel Cross at North Point Systems. He just wouldn't know it for another 2 weeks. The recruitment had to be surgical. One wrong move and Daniel would know something was happening. I started with Sophie, catching her at the coffee shop across the street during her lunch break. I need you to keep this absolutely confidential, I said after checking we weren't being watched. I'm leaving North Point in 2 weeks, and I want you to come with me. Her eyes widened. Emily, Senior designer role, 40% raise, full benefits, working directly under me at Summit Works. You'd be leading the accessibility features you've been fighting Ryan to implement. She didn't hesitate. When do I start? Give your notice the same day I do, not a moment before. Can you handle 2 more weeks of Ryan? I can handle anything knowing there's an exit. Mark was trickier. I had to catch him in the parking garage at 7 p.m., after most people had left. That load test you ran, I said without preamble. The one showing Daniel's AI infrastructure would crash the system. He looked around nervously. I don't know what you're talking about. Mark, I'm leaving. And when I go, you're going to be the only one who knows the system can't handle what Daniel's promising. When it fails, and it will fail, who do you think he'll blame? His shoulders sagged. I've been interviewing anyway. Come with me instead. Summit Works. Senior back-end engineer. They actually respect technical expertise there, and they need someone who understands enterprise-scale architecture. You're recruiting for the competition. I'm saving the people who deserve better. There's a difference. He was quiet for a moment. Lisa mentioned Daniel's moving her to night support. Lisa's coming too. Customer success lead, day shift, working with clients who actually value her input. This is coordinated. This is necessary. Daniel wanted to reshape the team in his image. Well, he's about to get his wish minus everyone who actually knows how to build and maintain products. Mark laughed, bitter but genuine. 2 weeks. Keep everything normal until then. And Mark bring copies of those load tests. Summit Works will want to know what not to build. Lisa was the easiest. She was already mentally checked out, spending her breaks crying in her car. When I approached her with the offer, she nearly hugged me. Customer success lead, she repeated. Not junior associate, not support specialist. Lead, with a team under you, and direct client contact, including the Atlas account when we win it. When, not if. When Janet Morrison asked for you specifically, turns out she's been very unhappy that Daniel removed you from their account. That sealed it. Lisa was in. But I needed one more piece, someone still in Daniel's inner circle, who could confirm he was focusing on the wrong things. That's when fate intervened. Ryan, drunk at the company happy hour, cornered me near the bathroom. You know he's going to fire you, right? He slurred. After the board meeting, he just needs you to finish the documentation first. The board meeting. Big presentation, his new AI vision, going to show them how obsolete the old guard is, how user research is dead, how intuitive design is the future. He swayed slightly. I designed the new interface myself. It's gorgeous. I'm sure it is, Ryan. You don't believe me. He pulled out his phone, showing me screenshots. It was a disaster, random gradients, no consistent navigation, accessibility violations everywhere. This is the future, Emily. This is what innovation looks like. I took mental notes of everything. The board meeting was in 2 weeks' perfect timing. Daniel would be so focused on his presentation, he wouldn't notice the exodus until it was too late. Over the next few days, I carefully documented everything for my replacements at SummitWorks. Not North Point's property that would be theft, but my processes, my methodologies, my approach to user research, all the things Daniel had declared worthless, but that actually made products successful. I also reached out to a few other key people, planting seeds. The QA lead who Daniel had relegated to manual testing despite her automation expertise. The junior developer Daniel had passed over for promotion 3 times. The marketing coordinator whose user insights Daniel regularly ignored. I didn't recruit them directly, too risky, but I made sure they knew SummitWorks was hiring and that I'd be happy to provide references. The beautiful part was how normal everything seemed. I showed up every day, updated the style guide, attended the few meetings I was still invited to. Daniel even complimented my improved attitude in passing, completely oblivious to what was building beneath the surface. Sophie, Mark, and Lisa maintained their covers perfectly. Sophie continued to accept Ryan's ridiculous feedback with a smile. Mark kept quiet about the infrastructure problems. Lisa worked her night shifts without complaint. We were all model employees, right up until we weren't going to be employees at all. The final touch came when I overheard Daniel on a conference call, pitching his AI framework to investors using North Point's conference room, on company time, with proprietary data visible on his screen. I recorded 15 seconds of video from the hallway, enough to establish time, place, and context, insurance, in case he tried to play dirty later. Everything was in place. The team was secured. The evidence was documented. The enhancement project was safely in my possession. In less than a week, Daniel would stand before the board, promising an AI revolution with a team that wouldn't exist, an infrastructure that couldn't deliver. And I would be across town, building the future he'd dismissed as kindergarten stuff. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. Daniel had been preparing for weeks, bringing in expensive consultants, creating elaborate visualizations, even hiring a presentation coach. The entire office buzzed with anticipation. This was his moment to cement his vision for North Point's future. I watched from my office as he practiced his pitch in the glass conference room, gesturing dramatically at slides filled with AI buzzwords and exponential growth curves. Ryan stood beside him, nodding enthusiastically at every point. They'd even brought in a prototype, Ryan's disaster of an interface running on top of a basic chatbot that Daniel claimed was revolutionary machine learning. At 1:45 p.m., the board members began arriving. I recognized several faces, investors who'd backed Michael Torres's vision, now about to be sold Daniel's snake oil. They looked impressed by the theatrical setup. Daniel had even hired a professional AV team. At 1:50 p.m., I opened my laptop and pulled up my resignation letter. Simple, professional, effective immediately. I'd already removed all personal items from my office over the past week, one coffee mug and picture frame at a time. My desk was clean. My files were transferred. My documentation was complete. At 1:55 p.m., I watched Daniel stride confidently into the boardroom, Ryan trailing behind with a stack of bound presentations. The door closed. The show was beginning. At 2 p.m. exactly, I hit send. The email went to HR, CCing Daniel, the board, and the leadership team. 2 paragraphs. Thank you for the opportunity. Effective immediately. No drama. No accusations. Just done. At 2:01 p.m., Sophie's resignation email landed. At 2:02 p.m., Mark's followed. At 2:03 p.m., Lisa's completed the set. I could see Daniel through the glass, mid-gesture. When his phone buzzed, he ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. Finally, irritated, he glanced at the screen. I watched his face change confusion, then alarm, then barely controlled rage. He excused himself, stepping out of the boardroom. His call came at 2:05 p.m. "What the hell is this, Emily?" "It's my resignation. I thought it was quite clear." "You can't just the documentation isn't finished. You have responsibilities." "Had, past tense. And actually, the documentation is complete. I sent it to Ryan this morning. Everything he needs to maintain the legacy systems." "This is sabotage. You coordinated this." "I'm not responsible for other people's career decisions. Daniel, though I understand why they might want to leave, you did say if we didn't like it, we should go." "I'll sue you. This is clearly orchestrated." "For what quitting that's still legal in Colorado. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting. Good luck with your presentation." I hung up and immediately blocked his number. Through the window, I could see him pacing, making frantic calls. HR maybe, or legal. But what could they do? We'd given notice. We'd transitioned our work. We'd followed every protocol. He returned to the boardroom at 2:15 p.m., visibly shaken but trying to maintain composure. But the damage was spreading. Board members were checking their phones, seeing the resignation emails, asking questions. Daniel's carefully rehearsed presentation was falling apart. Then the real blow landed. At 2:30 p.m., as Daniel was attempting to demo Ryan's interface, the system crashed. Not a small glitch, a complete failure. The infrastructure Mark had warned about couldn't handle even the basic AI operations. The screen went blue. Error messages cascaded. Ryan frantically tried to restart, but it was gone. I learned later from someone still inside that Daniel tried to salvage it. He talked about minor technical adjustments and expected optimization phases, but the board wasn't buying it. One member asked directly, "If your team lead and 3 key engineers just quit simultaneously, who exactly is going to build this vision?" Daniel had no answer. The meeting ended at 3:20 p.m., 2 hours earlier than scheduled. No approval for the AI initiative, no endorsement of the new direction. Instead, serious questions about talent retention and technical viability. The board requested a full review of the product department's status, including an explanation for the mass resignation. By 4 p.m., my phone was buzzing with texts from colleagues still at North Point. The news had spread instantly. Daniel had retreated to his office and hadn't emerged. Ryan was wandering the floors, asking anyone who would listen if they knew anything about back-end architecture. HR was in crisis mode, trying to figure out who else might be planning to leave. The best part? Daniel couldn't even accuse me of taking proprietary information. The enhancement project he'd so publicly dismissed as worthless couldn't suddenly become valuable intellectual property. His own words, documented in multiple emails and witnessed by dozens of employees, had freed me completely. At 5 p.m., I got a text from Michael Torres, my old CEO. "Heard about the mass exodus. Daniel must be beside himself. Whatever you're doing next, Emily, I'm sure it'll be brilliant." I smiled, closing my laptop for the last time as a North Point employee. Across town, my new team at SummitWorks was waiting. We had 3 weeks to prepare for the Atlas presentation, 3 weeks to turn Daniel's garbage into gold. The king had been dethroned. He just didn't know yet that this was only the beginning of his fall. The real devastation would come when Atlas Corp saw what we'd built. Everything Daniel had said was impossible. Everything he'd dismissed as outdated. Everything he'd tried to bury. His career at North Point ended the moment he told me to leave. It just took him a few weeks to realize it. 3 weeks later, I stood in SummitWorks' presentation room, watching my team put the final touches on our demo for Atlas Corp. Sophie had refined the accessibility features until they were flawless. Mark had built an infrastructure that could actually scale. Lisa had prepared customer success metrics that showed exactly how we'd support Atlas's global operations. The enhancement project Daniel had dismissed as kindergarten stuff now looked like graduate-level innovation. Every pain point Atlas had mentioned over the past year was addressed. Every feature they'd requested was implemented. Every standard they required was exceeded. Janet Morrison arrived with her team at 10 a.m. sharp. She smiled when she saw me. "Emily, I heard you'd moved to SummitWorks. This changes everything." The presentation was scheduled for 90 minutes. We finished in 60. Not because we rushed, but because everything worked exactly as promised. No crashes, no glitches, no empty promises about future features. Just solid, user-tested, enterprise-ready solutions. This is exactly what we've been asking Northpoint for, Janet said, navigating through the interface herself. How long have you been working on this? 6 months of research and development, I replied. Every feature is based on actual user feedback and testing. And Northpoint didn't want this. They had different priorities. Janet exchanged glances with her team. We need to discuss internally, but I think you know which direction we're leaning. 2 days later, the news broke. Atlas Corp, representing 40% of Northpoint's revenue, would not be renewing their contract. They were moving to SummitWorks, citing superior product vision and team expertise. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Daniel was called into an emergency board meeting. Without Atlas, Northpoint's valuation plummeted. The stock dropped 18% in 1 day. 3 more major clients, seeing Atlas leave, started reconsidering their own contracts. I heard through the grapevine that Daniel tried to blame everyone but himself. He accused me of stealing intellectual property until legal reminded him of his own documented statements calling the work worthless. He claimed sabotage until HR showed him our complete documentation and proper resignation notices. He even suggested suing SummitWorks until someone pointed out his own potential insider trading violations with his side AI venture. The board gave him 2 options: resign with a modest severance and a non-disclosure agreement, or be terminated for cause with nothing. He chose resignation. His last day was exactly 6 weeks after he told me to leave if I didn't like it. Ryan lasted another month before being quietly let go. Without Daniel's protection, and with no actual design skills, he couldn't justify his position. The QA lead I'd tipped off about SummitWorks openings. She became Northpoint's new interim VP of product, the junior developer Daniel had overlooked. He got promoted twice in 3 months. Michael Torres, hearing about the disaster, came back from the parent company to stabilize things. His first all-hands meeting included a direct apology. We lost sight of what made Northpoint special. We forgot that great products come from respecting both our users and our people. That stops now. But I wasn't there to hear it. I was in my new office at SummitWorks, surrounded by a team that valued what I brought to the table. Sophie had just won an Accessibility Innovation Award. Mark had architected a system that was becoming the industry standard. Lisa had turned Atlas into such a success story that 3 more enterprise clients had signed on just to work with her. The enhancement project became SummitWorks' flagship product feature. It generated $12 million in new revenue in the first quarter alone. My name was on the patent filings. My team got the credit. And Daniel Cross became a cautionary tale whispered at industry conferences, the executive who destroyed a $40 million contract because he couldn't recognize value when it was standing right in front of him. 6 months later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You were right." It was from Daniel. A long, rambling message about how he'd been reflecting, how he'd learned from his mistakes, how he hoped there were no hard feelings. I didn't reply. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding, even after they've finished burning. Today, I'm a partner at SummitWorks. My team has grown to 30 people. We've won awards for our user-centered design approach, the same approach Daniel called outdated. And every time I stand in front of a boardroom, presenting work I know will make a difference, I remember that moment when he said, "If you don't like it, leave." I did leave, and I took everything that mattered with me. The best revenge isn't just success. It's building something better from the ashes of what someone else tried to burn down. It's proving that what they dismissed as worthless was actually priceless. It's watching them realize, too late, that they weren't the hero of the story, they were the villain who created their own downfall. Daniel Cross gave me the push I needed to find something better. For that, and only that, I'm grateful. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment, and let's connect. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts or experiences. Sometimes the best career move is walking away, especially when you can take half the team with you.